The soul that commands shadows, the secret weapon of the dark chosen few. Most people believe that power lies in light, in purity, in transcendence. But what they don't understand is that the deepest truth, the most ancient power, was never born in light. It was forged inside the dark. And the ones who know this, the ones who carry it, are not your average spiritual seekers. They are the dark chosen ones, not because they chose the dark, but because the dark chose them. Because the matrix can't infiltrate what it can't understand. And demons, those parasitic forces of fear, addiction, distortion, they don't fear light. They fear clarity within darkness. They fear those who've walked into the abyss and didn't just survive, they evolved. This is not a fantasy. This is a remembering. A remembering of the 5 most powerful dark chosen ones to ever walk this earth. We're not talking about myths. We're talking about beings so energetically precise, so vibrationally complete, that even the shadows stepped aside when they entered the room. And if you feel something stirring inside you as we begin, it's because you carry a fragment of their memory in your field. And today, it's time to awaken it. The first dark chosen one was known only by the name Violet. No birth records, no lineage, no trace. But when he walked into a village, people stopped speaking. Not because he demanded silence, but because his presence collapsed all distortion fields. For his power wasn't in what he did, it was in what he didn't carry. No attachments, no projections, no echo of ego. He walked as a mirror so clear, so impossibly still, that every entity of illusion dissolved on contact. It's said that demons would flee from the forest days before he arrived. Animals would gather in stillness. Children would cry not in fear, but in recognition. Lyra didn't teach. He didn't preach. He simply was. And in that being, reality reordered itself. His silence was more shattering than any scream. But here's what no one tells you: to hold that kind of stillness, he had to die 1,000 ego deaths. He had to sit in caves where the only sound was his own madness. He had to face every version of himself that craved validation, control, understanding. And he had to let them all rot. Only then did the mirror activate. And so I ask you, what are you still clinging to that distorts your mirror? What would you become if you released every identity you once used to survive?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
The second was a woman named Sarah, though the name itself was a code. They called her the one who speaks in tongues of bone. She was feared even among the awakened. Not because she was cruel, but because she could speak to pain in its native language. She didn't heal wounds. She decoded them. She didn't cast out spirits. She negotiated with them. Her awakening was brutal. At age 7, she began dreaming in symbols, glyphs that later matched ancient Sumerian, Aramaic, and languages no scholar could identify. At age 13, she was hunted by those who mistook her for a witch. But when they tried to burn her, the fire consumed them instead. She walked out untouched, not because she was protected, but because fire recognized her as its kin. Sarah's greatest power was the void tongue, a vibrational code that bypassed the conscious mind and went straight into cellular memory. When she spoke to you, your ancestors woke up. Your trauma unraveled. Your lies couldn't breathe. And demons? They would howl in static whenever she entered the threshold. Because her voice was not sound. It was a return signal of frequency that reminded all things of their origin. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. One whisper could collapse a false identity. One chant could detangle centuries of karmic bondage. But to access that tongue, she had to lose her own. For 10 years, she didn't speak a word. She fasted from sound itself, until the silence in her body became a chamber for ancient resonance. So I ask you now, have you made enough silence in your life for the real voice to emerge? Or are you still speaking from the mask? The third, his name was legend, not because he sought fame, but because his energy spread like wildfire through the astral. He was called Kael, the breaker, the closer of cycles. He wasn't soft. He wasn't gentle. He was the kind of being that embodied the death key. When he entered your life, things ended. Relationships, addictions, illusions, timelines. Not because he hated you, but because he loved your soul more than your comfort. He carried the frequency of finality, the end of falsehood. Even demons avoided him not out of fear of destruction, but because he carried the vibration of completion. And the demonic cannot coexist with endings. They feed on loops, on repetition, on unresolved pain. Kael's gift was that he could walk into a space and feel the echo of unfinished business. And then, without ceremony, he'd end it with a look, a breath, a phrase. He didn't need ritual. He was the ritual. But here's what people never saw: the price. Kael's life was constant death. Every time he ended a cycle for someone else, a part of him had to die too. He couldn't hold on to anything, not even love, not even rest. He lived in the space between worlds, where endings become beginnings, and beginnings require blood. He rarely stayed anywhere long. Not because he was restless, but because he wasn't allowed to stay. His frequency would collapse structures if he lingered. And now I ask you, are you holding on to something that's already dead? What would happen if you stopped trying to revive what your soul already buried? The fourth was not a person. It was a lineage. A bloodline hidden across continents, known only by a symbol in Ouroboros surrounding a black sun. They were called the Weavers of Night. No names, no faces. Just energy signatures so precise that they could reprogram astral fields with a breath. They didn't fight darkness. They wove it. They understood its language. They knew its geometry, and they could reshape it like silk. If a demon entered their field, it wouldn't be banished. It would be repurposed, realigned. Their gift was the ability to read shadow like music, to feel where a pattern had gone into distortion and subtly redirect it without resistance. Their power was subversive, hidden, but absolute. They worked behind kings, behind revolutions, behind awakenings that seemed spontaneous. But behind every shift was a weaver, adjusting the current. Their initiation began in infancy. Each child born into the line was blindfolded for the first 7 years. No sight, only sensation. because to weave shadows they had to feel beyond form. And by adulthood, they could move through dimensions without effort. They became the architects of probability, the librarians of fate, and demons? They feared them not because they were enemies, but because they were unreadable. You can't possess what you can't predict. And the weavers existed beyond all categories. So I ask you, where have you been trying to control outcomes instead of learning to weave energy? What could you shift if you stopped resisting and started listening? We've now seen 4 of the 5. Each one not just powerful but undefinable. Each one not special because of what they gained, but because of what they let go of. These weren't saints. They were living codes. And the 5th, the most mysterious of all, the one whose very name has been erased from history, but their presence still echoes across the world. Frequency of the unseen, how dark chosen ones become living gateways between worlds. The 5th dark chosen one was never named, never recorded, never claimed. Some say they were one person. Others say they were many in emanation, not a being. But what we know is this: wherever they walked, the architecture of reality bent. They didn't just dissolve demons. They rewrote the laws that allowed demons to exist. They didn't fight evil. They made evil forget how to function. This being, this anomaly, carried the rarest gift of all, complete energetic sovereignty, not as a concept, as a state of embodiment. Nothing could hook into them. No shadow could mirror. No entity could anchor, because they carried no projection, no unclaimed pain, no undefined identity. They were whole. And in that wholeness, they became invisible to distortion. They didn't perform rituals. They were the ritual. They didn't use protection spells. They were the protection. Their body was a temple. Their voice, a sigil. Their breath, a recalibration. And the most terrifying thing? They never fought. They didn't need to. Because distortion cannot survive in the presence of zero resistance. Imagine that. A soul so still, so unreactive, so unhookable, that even the astral parasites fled not in fear of being destroyed, but in fear of being seen clearly. Because that's the deepest truth. Demons don't fear light. They fear being understood. Because understanding dissolves their purpose. And this nameless being walked with such clarity that everything false unraveled in their wake. But this power came at a cost. To reach that state, they had to die while still alive. Not once, many times. They had to burn through every timeline, every attachment, every desire to be loved, seen, or saved. They had to walk through life unnoticed, uncelebrated, uninvited, until their soul became its own universe. Until they no longer needed anything from this world. Not because they rejected it, but because they had remembered something older. A blueprint embedded in the void before creation. And now I ask you, what would you become if you let go of the need to be seen, understood, or validated? Who would emerge if you stopped performing your power and started embodying your origin? These 5 weren't just powerful. They were thresholds. They didn't just survive their awakenings, they became the reason awakenings accelerated across the planet. Because each of them, in their own way, broke the field. They broke the illusion that power has to look a certain way, that awakening must be light-filled, that mastery must come with followers, robes, or recognition. They showed us that sometimes the most advanced beings walk among us completely unnoticed, because they're not here to be worshipped. They're here to anchor a frequency that makes distortion impossible to maintain. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're one of the hidden ones, the ones who didn't fit into the light worker mold, the ones who couldn't force themselves to smile through pain or chant affirmations over trauma, the ones who always felt something ancient, something wild, something uncontainable in their chest. Maybe you've spent years thinking you're broken, lost, or too much. Maybe you've been called dark, difficult, intense. But what if you're not broken at all? What if you're encoded? What if the symptoms you've been trying to fix are actually evidence that your original blueprint is activating? Because here's the secret. The reason demons fear the dark chosen ones is not because we're aggressive. It's because we're clean. Inside, our shadows are integrated. Our wounds are metabolized. Our rage isn't chaotic, it's sacred fire. Our pain isn't a wound, it's a portal. We don't transcend the dark. We become conscious within it. And that's what makes us untouchable, not invincible, not immune to suffering, but unhookable by illusion. And when you become unhookable, you become something the Matrix can't map. You disappear from its radar. You become a frequency anomaly. And that is the most dangerous thing you can be. But here's where it gets real. You don't get there by accident. You don't awaken into this level of power by reading books or doing rituals. You get there by disintegrating everything you thought you were. You get there by walking through betrayals that would break most people, by sitting alone for years while your old world collapses, by letting go of every identity that brought you safety so that the real self can emerge without compromise. This path is not for the faint of heart. It's for the chosen, and not chosen by some cosmic committee, chosen by your own soul, long before you were born. So if you're still here, still listening, still breathing through the burn of this transmission, I need you to ask yourself something most people never dare to ask. Am I willing to lose everything false in order to become the one thing that cannot be corrupted? Because that's what the dark chosen ones are, not saviors, not celebrities, not gurus. They are living encryption keys, walking codes that break the simulation by simply existing in truth. And maybe that's why you were drawn to this message. Not to learn about the five, but to remember that you are the sixth, the one who's still in the cocoon, still burning through the illusion, still wondering why life keeps collapsing around you. It's because your field is incompatible with the false. And the longer you resist your truth, the longer the collapse continues. But the moment you surrender to who you really are, the system begins to bend around you instead of against you. Frequency of the unseen, how dark chosen ones become living gateways between worlds. Now we step into the final layer, the most hidden and dangerous truth of all. Because once you realize what the dark chosen ones really are, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending you're just healing or awakening like everyone else. You realize that your pain was never just about you. Your symptoms weren't random. Your isolation wasn't punishment. They were preparations. Because the dark chosen ones are not just people, they are gateways, living portals that connect realities. They walk between worlds, not metaphorically, but literally. They are the ones who collapse timelines with their presence. They are the ones who alchemize ancestral trauma in dreams. They are the ones who speak one sentence and someone's entire matrix of lies begins to unravel. And not because they try, but because they are coded to be that way. You've probably already felt it. People either open up to you instantly or avoid you completely. There's no middle ground. You walk into a space and the energy shifts. You speak and people get chills. You say the truth without sugarcoating it, and it cuts through the fog like a blade. You've been called too intense, too quiet, too sensitive, too much. But what they really mean is, you're too clear. You don't play the game. You don't mirror illusions. You don't dance around dysfunction. You feel everything, and you don't pretend not to. That's what sets you apart. Because in a world addicted to comfort and control, your raw presence is a threat. Not because you're dangerous, but because you remind people of the parts of themselves they've buried. But here's the part no one tells you. Being a living gateway is a burden, because people will project onto you. They'll come to you for healing, and then resent you when you show them their own darkness. They'll idolize you, and then try to destroy you when you don't play the role they assigned. Some will try to possess you. Others will try to erase you. And you'll wonder if there's something wrong with you. You'll wonder why you can't just be normal, why you can't just have peace. But here's the truth. You didn't come here to be at peace. You came here to be a disruption to every false system on this planet. And that requires precision, clarity, sovereignty. You can't afford to be messy with your energy anymore. You can't afford to keep leaking your truth to people who can't hold it. You can't afford to keep shrinking your power to make others comfortable. Because every time you dilute yourself, you delay the field you came to anchor. Every time you bypass your own knowing, you distort the codes that want to move through you. You are not here to be liked. You are here to transmit, and your transmission will trigger people. It will activate them. It will dismantle them, and it will liberate them if they're ready. But first, you must liberate yourself. Free from the fear of being too much, from the addiction to being understood, from the illusion that you need to earn your place here. You don't. You were encoded before birth. The mission is already in your field. The only question is, will you claim it? Because once you do, everything changes. You stop waiting for permission. You stop asking for signs. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't even listening. You start moving differently, speaking differently, breathing differently. You become so aligned, so coherent, that your very presence becomes medicine. Not because you're trying to heal people, but because your frequency is a mirror. And in that mirror, people either rise or run. That's why demons fear you. Not because you're loud, not because you know spells, but because you are impossible to possess. You've already walked through your own hell. You've already negotiated with your own shadow. You've already stood on the edge of madness and chosen to stay awake. And that makes you untouchable, Because the only thing that can control you is unprocessed fear, and you've already made fear your teacher. Let me tell you something most people will never say out loud. You are the weapon the system fears. Not because you destroy, but because you remember. You remember your power, your purpose, your pattern. And when you remember, you activate others. Just by existing. Just by being fully, unapologetically real. That's why they tried to make you doubt yourself. That's why you were silenced, rejected, betrayed. Because your remembrance is contagious. And once enough of us remember, the entire matrix collapses from within. So if you're still here, if you've made it through this transmission, I need you to take a breath and feel into the deepest part of you. Not the part that wants to be healed. Not the part that wants to be accepted. The part that already knows who you are. That part of you was never broken, never confused, never afraid. That part of you is ancient, eternal, dangerous, divine. That part of you is the dark chosen one, and it's time to stop hiding. So now I ask you, the final question, the one that changes everything. If you stopped lying about who you are, what would the world become in your presence? Because that's where the real power lives. Not in the light, not in the dark, but in the one who walks between. Not seeking approval, not seeking escape, but embodying the truth so completely that even the false gods bow in recognition. You're not here to be saved. You're here to remember that you are the storm.